And if you couldn't prove it, I didn't want to hear anything about it. And then my work took me from the East Coast and I relocated out to Boulder, Colorado. And as I was relocating, everyone said, "Don't let it wear off on you." Yeah. And that was the famous last words. Everyone has had an experience where they're thinking about a loved one and then the phone rings and it's that loved one.
Hello, spiritual friends, and welcome to another episode of Life Ascended. One of my favorite topics that we're going to discuss today is intuition. And I have a beautiful guest to help us understand our 7 types of intuition. Today we have Kimberly Chiarello. She is a spiritual teacher, intuitive energy healing facilitator, and founder of Celestial Healing with over 15 years of experience. She combines advanced intuitive abilities and energy healing modalities like evolutionary Reiki and magnified healing to help clients connect with their soul, release unconscious blocks, and manifest their heart's desires. Kimberly leads workshops and private sessions, empowering spiritual seekers and healers with 4D and 5D techniques to accelerate their spiritual evolution. Currently writing a series of books on advanced spiritual mastery, Kimberly's passion is to inspire others to create the life they desire and achieve spiritual mastery in this lifetime. You can learn more at bethechangenow.com. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Kimberly.
Thank you, Cynthia. Thank you for the kind introduction. And I'm so excited
to be back. It's always great to connect with spiritual family members is kind of how I view us. So yeah, I want to start out by just asking you, how did you get involved in this pathway? How did you end up doing what you're doing now?
Oh, well, that's a long story. But the short story is, right, when it's time, it's time. I started out as an electrical engineer, an aerospace engineer, and a computer programmer. And if you couldn't prove it, I didn't want to hear anything about it. And then my work took me from the East Coast and I relocated out to Boulder, Colorado. And as I was relocating, everyone said, "Don't let it wear off on you. Watch out for the flying granola." And I'm like, "No problem, no worries. I am very grounded. This is not happening." Yeah. And that was the famous last words. So I actually started having medical stuff. And I started getting numbness in my hand over the weeks. It started spreading up my arm, up my neck, over the top of my head, down the other side of the neck. When it was in my hand, I started going to the doctor and they started sending me to specialists. And it was like one specialist after the other would say, "You're fine." And my general practitioner would tell me that. And I'd just start crying. And he's like, "Why are you crying?" I'm like, "Because it means it's something worse." Right?
Oh no.
Right?
Yeah.
And so it started me seeking on, like, I really felt, I was in my 20s. I'm like, I really feel I'm going to die before they figure this out. Right? I'm like, it's serious. Like, we got down to like, it's either MS or brain cancer. Right. So it's serious. And I'm like, I need to know if I'm going to die, I need to know why we're here on this planet. Why am I here on this planet? And I started searching, but it was just kind of toe in the water, more from a philosophy perspective. Long story short, I met a guy. Normally at that time, I had to know someone for a while before I start dating them. The day we met, he asked me out and I said yes. And he started talking about these spiritual classes and the spiritual teacher and how my energy was so powerful. What a freaking Looney Tune, And
Uh-huh.
I'm like, I don't know about this. The more he pushed, the more I pushed back, which is what is normal for anyone. It was a whirlwind. We saw each other every day, which I'd never done before. He ended it by text in a bad way. And for the first time in my life, I got angry. Normally, when a relationship ended, I'd just be the stereotypical watching sappy movies and eating my pint of ice cream and crying, right? But this time I got angry because how it happened, and there's more to the story. His ex-girlfriend, who was I'm going to put this in air quotes, psychic reader, because she really wasn't. Well, I mean, she was reading her ego, so I guess she was reading something. Told him to break up with me and
Oh
to have
no.
with her.
Oh no.
She could live with him for free and all that stuff. And he just, he gave all his power away to her. And I was like, so I decided in my anger, I was going to attend these classes he had been telling me about,
Hmm.
to tell the teacher she was insane, to tell him he didn't understand what she was teaching, and just to make a big, the highest way to act. My
Right.
penchant shifted from the poor me and crying to like, and of course, it was, the divine timing. She only taught the classes like once every 3 to 4 months. And it just happened. She was teaching that weekend. Just happened. There was one opening and I could get into class. Like all of those things. And I had my plan. It was like a full day class. I'm like, I'm just staying to the first break. I'm going to make my little, and I'm going to
Hmm.
leave.
Hmm.
Right? That was my plan. And then
Uh-huh.
also it's like lunch break, and I'm like, oh, I'm still here. And like she's teaching stuff, and I'm like, oh yeah, this makes sense. Oh yeah, this. We get to the end of the day, and it's like dinner time, and I'm like, oh my god, I stayed the whole day. And then she's like, well, part two of the class, I forget, it was like tomorrow or the next week. There's an opening as well. Do you want to attend that? And it was like I was almost out of my body. I heard myself going like, yes. And I'm like, what? And so not only did I not do the whole scene, what I realized after the first class was it was giving me all the tools and techniques I needed to find my own answer as to why are we here? Why am I here? What's my purpose? Which is what I
Hmm.
have been searching for. So the rest was history. Gave me the tools, and I became a Reiki master with her as well. I kept telling her I'm not going to teach, I'm not going to see private clients, I'm just learning this for myself and my own spiritual evolution. And she would just smile. She'd be like, oh, okay.
Okay, whatever you say.
Because she knew, she saw it, and it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, I'm a spiritual teacher and intuitive. It's like, okay. And, little by little, it was like, well, I'm only going to have a booth at metaphysical fairs. I'll see private clients, but I'm not going to teach. Well, I'm just going to teach this, but not that. It's just my life path. Now, looking back at it, I had intuitive abilities as a child. The family I grew up in was Catholic, and intuitive abilities are considered evil
Hmm.
and whatnot. So we didn't
I've
have,
been told that.
yeah, I didn't even have words for it, but I would tell my mother something and she would yell at me like, how do you know it? Where's your proof? And I'm like, I don't know. Doesn't everyone notice? It was just as simple as me looking at you right now.
Hmm.
Right now I know what all of that was because I didn't even have language for it.
So
Anyway.
interesting. This brings up a good point, though,
Mhm.
because I feel like people who are just getting onto the intuitive pathway have a lot of that history and resistance and stigma, just like you said, with religion. We're not taught to nurture our intuitive abilities, we're taught to discount them essentially. So I think a lot of people have pushed them down over time. And yet, don't you feel like everyone has intuitive abilities?
Oh, definitely. So many people are just like, oh, I'm not, some people are the horse whisperer or the dog whisperer or talking to people who transitioned and, oh, I don't have that. And it's like, we all have that, just like we have our five senses. And just like an Olympic athlete without honing and training, it's the same thing with our intuitive abilities.
Mm.
We train them, they grow more and more as we spiritually evolve. That's for my all day class, but I have fun
Yeah.
about myself with that because right, I said I'm not going to be a reader, honing my intuitive abilities. So I have a clear connection with my inner guidance, with my higher self, with my soul, whatever word you want to use.
Mm.
And that was my goal. But the side effect was that everything started blowing up, and I would be in the food store, and all of a sudden it was like I knew what was going on with everybody in the store. I had to hone my skills a little bit more because a lot of people are walking around with a lot of pain that
Yeah.
they're to avoid, repress, deny. But I was picking up on it, not only picking up on it, but feeling it as if it was my own. So I
Yeah.
was sobbing and sobbing through my whole food shopping experience.
Oh.
Right? It was bad. And I'm like, okay, I have to learn what's mine and what's theirs,
Mm-hmm.
and not to take it on. It's okay to be aware of it, but truthfully, it's only okay to be aware of it if they're asking you to be aware of it.
For sure.
Otherwise, I call that psychic voyeurism. Circling back to your question, like, yes, everybody has these abilities. Everyone has had an experience where they're thinking about a loved one and then the phone rings and it's that loved one, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
that's, you do have some, and it's okay. Now let's hone and practice.
Yeah,
Right.
for sure. So let's talk about the 7 types because I'm sure everybody's curious about that. Let's go through the 7 types and describe how they work.
It's so important too. Most of the classes out there only focus with the first one, which I'm going to mention. And I'm pointing here because I have my list, so I keep myself on track. But clairvoyance, and clairvoyance is seeing, just like we're seeing each other now, just like the viewers are seeing us on the video right now,
Mm-hmm.
right? And most intuitive classes only focus on that. And if that's kind of not your strong suit to start with, usually have 1 or 2 out of the 7 that are kind of like ones that we can already relate to. It's really challenging, but it's, in clairvoyance, it's seeing like we're seeing each other now, or sometimes it's just seeing colors, or it could be seeing auras and things like that, or seeing a symbol that means something to you. Oh,
Hmm.
every time I see a butterfly, I think of my grandmother.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So that's the symbol for me,
Yeah.
those types of things. The next one is clairsentience, which is a knowingness. It's like you just know. And there is no, I'm not seeing, I'm not hearing. And that's the hardest one to hone. It's also the closest one to how you experience oneness. And that was one of my strong suits as a child, hence my parents yelling at me, like, how do you know this? And I'm like, I don't know. And everyone know. And then it would come
Mhm.
true and they'd be like, oh. Like, didn't she say that a couple weeks ago? Anyhow, it's that knowingness where something comes to mind, or even in your mind, words come to you. I'm glad it was frustrating in the beginning for me, but I'm glad it was one of my ones to start with because it forced me to hone in more.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
So
think
let's
people are probably more strong in that one than in clairvoyance. Because, yeah, you're right. Clairvoyance is what we think of when we think of the term psychic, but it's certainly not the main one. It's interesting how we have these perceptions.
Are you ready to unlock your true potential and embrace a life filled with unconditional love and inner peace? Introducing the Diamond Heart Emotional Ascension Program, a transformative journey designed to help you heal deep emotional challenges and rediscover your authentic self. In just 3 months, you'll learn to identify emotional blocks from your very own hands that have been holding you back and release them vibrationally. Rewire limiting patterns with tools from higher dimensional realms. Activate your diamond heart, aligning with divine intelligence and embracing self-love. Guided by spiritual mentor Cynthia Clark, this course offers a pathway to emotional freedom and higher self-expression. Don't wait to start your journey toward profound inner peace. Visit ascension17.com/courses to enroll in the Diamond Heart program today. Your ascension begins with the heart. And now back to the episode.
right, all 7, we all have all 7, even though we might not be experiencing it. And they all will grow as we grow and evolve spiritually, just like we have our 5 senses. Eventually, we will be interacting with all of them because it gives us a more clear picture of what's
Mm-hmm.
going on in the world.
All right. So, what's the next one?
I have kinesthetic is what I call it. Kinesthetic is feeling things physically. So feeling warmth, feeling hot, feeling cold. If someone has a bad back, you like feel in your back where it's happening. Those, and you're
Sure.
like, am I taking it on? And not necessarily. It could just be you're sensing it. This is how that intuitive ability works. This one is a great one. A lot of people have this one as well, and it helps when you're first starting to learn.
Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people who do energy work have this one quite well developed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it helps me with clients and they say they have the bad back, and I can say, oh, the pain starts at your left back hip and goes diagonally across your body. And they're like, how do you know that? Because I can feel it. But I turn it on and turn it off just so I sense where they're coming from, and we can go into that session. But for beginning intuitive abilities, what a lot of people find useful, and I found useful for me when I was learning, is that you can just see something simple of, I'm going to ask a yes, no question to my inner guidance, to my higher self. And if my right hand tingles, that's a yes. And if my left hand tingles, that's a no. And you let it get tingly. I've learned quickly you don't want to feel hot because hot's not fun. I was like, well, let's get it like little tingles. All right.
Yeah.
And that's really easy to do, even when I'm out, you're out at a restaurant and you're like, what's the highest plan for me to have for my meal? It's not like you have to be like, woo, and people are looking at you, right? It's just as you're holding your menu, one hand is tingling, the other one's tingling.
Yeah, that's a good way to think of it.
And it's one way to start using it. Of course, there's many other things. So let's get to number 4. The word I use is empath. I do clarify because so many people use that word in many different ways, right? Interchange empath and intuitive as a word. And that's totally fine. That's not my definition. This intuitive ability of empath is feeling things emotionally, right?
Exactly.
So picking up on the emotions of other people. I had a client years ago, her 5-year-old son knew about intuitive abilities. She was still honing hers, but her son was an empath. His best friend's parents were going through a divorce, and all of a sudden he didn't want to be at their house anymore. She's like, I don't know what to do. It's his best friend. I said, he's picking up on the emotions of the parents. It was not a pleasant divorce, right? It was very contentious.
Yeah.
So the 5-year-old, he's feeling the emotions of an adult, number one, and the complex, discordant emotions of an adult going through a divorce. Please don't force him to be there. Have the play dates at your house.
Don't punish him if he's feeling that.
Well, she didn't understand that he was an empath. And right, she just said, he's not doing, can you help? And we did a session on her son. And I'm like, oh, this is what's going on. She's like, oh, right. And so then I was able to help him on how to start at 5 years old, differentiating between what was his and what wasn't his.
That's important.
Introductory things to help support him at 5. But anyway, the emotional one is challenging. That was the other one. Hence why I was crying in the food store years ago and everywhere. Like I just pick up on everything. And I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Right. And you pick up on the anger too. And all of a sudden you're enraged and you're like, why am I enraged? There's nothing going on in my life that I would be angry about.
Sure.
So it's learning. And even as a teenager, again, I didn't have the language for intuitive abilities, but when I started dating, someone asked me on a date and we'd go out on a date and I'd be like so excited. I'm like, oh, I'm really into him and I think we'll go on more dates and maybe he'll be my boyfriend. And then I'd come home and I'm like, he's nice, but I really don't want to date him. And I'm like, why do I feel different than when I'm with him than when I'm not with him? Because I was feeling his feelings for me. Right?
Yeah.
He was really into me. And so it wasn't like he wasn't a nice person, but it was like, oh, I don't really feel like that. And my language as a teenager was, I know I need to be home by myself to really know how I feel about this person. But that was my language because I didn't understand intuition. I didn't understand empath.
Right. Because you needed to be in your own energy to really be separated from it enough to recognize. Yeah.
Well, I didn't even know about intuition, but I didn't even know about empath. So
yeah, for sure.
I was like, oh, I figured things out. But yeah, so that's what I mean when I say empath. Like you too as well.
For sure.
The next one is clairaudient. So that's hearing us talking right now versus something happening in your mind, right? So you're hearing
Mm-hmm.
things such as if you heard something in the room, like you would turn and go, who else is in the room with me?
Mm-hmm.
Versus just like, oh, these words are coming to me. That's clairsentience.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Hearing stuff, I have a class on this. And in the class, I guide people into meditation to start sensing their abilities. In one class, we finished the meditation and I'm asking people, what were the ones out of these 7 that they sensed? One person said, oh, nothing. I got nothing. I'm following everybody during the meditation. Their soul told me they got them. Their soul told me actually what their intuitive ability was. But they're saying they didn't get anything. I'm like, are you sure? She's like, no, it was so hard to concentrate with that dog barking. And the whole class looked at her and
Uh-huh.
said, there was no dog barking. Like, she was clairaudient, and her sound that she was getting was a dog barking, right?
Interesting.
Versus hearing words, versus hearing chimes, versus hearing music,
Mm-hmm.
that kind of thing. My clairaudience is pretty much 24 hours. Well, no, not when I'm sleeping, but most of my waking life, there's a radio station playing in my head.
Oh, that's got to be interesting.
It is. I remember years ago watching the TV show Medium. If anyone is interested, I think it's on Netflix. It's actually about a medium in Phoenix. You probably know this. I'm forgetting her real life name. Patricia Arquette played the character, but it was someone who started, her intuitive ability started popping up, and she wasn't into spirituality or anything like that. But so she was like reaching out, she was having to stumble and figure out everything on her own. There was an episode where she had the radio playing all the time. That's what my inner guidance, my higher self soul, is trying to give me a message. Because usually it's just like repeating one phrase in the song.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, here's the piece. You're not listening to us another way, so we're going to give you it in a clairaudient way. That's a differentiation between clairaudience and clairsentience. So sometimes people will say they're clairaudient just because, you know, words are coming to mind versus them hearing them as if we're talking now. When you're trying to hone and practice your skills, it does.
Yeah, sure.
Focusing on. Yeah. So the next one, the last 2 are less known about in the West, and I'm going to explain why. So we have centrist, right, which is about smelling. So there are practitioners in India that you go see, and they just have you stand and they sniff your body up and down and tell you what's going on with you.
Like a dog.
Right. And
Hmm.
right in the West, because of all the bathing and all the perfumes and the soaps, it's harder for us to hone that one.
Sure.
That one does hone as well. I have a colleague of mine, she's honed hers to a point where she can tell if someone's diabetic. She said people have a certain smell to them if they're diabetic.
Probably why dogs can be trained to do that as well, like service dogs. So it makes sense if we can develop our own sense of smell that we could do that as well.
Yeah. And again, it's a different intuitive ability. And a lot of people probably have heard different flowers, the smell of different flowers represents a different saint or a different archangel or
Mm.
something like that. So for me, if I'm smelling a flower and there's no flowers around,
I get that sometimes.
so if you're
Yeah,
smelling roses or you smell one thing versus another, it's like, oh, okay.
there's a
Okay.
specific angel or guide or somebody is showing up to make
Yeah.
themselves known. Yeah,
I,
that's
I
fun.
I have a guide who actually smokes cigarettes, and I cannot stand cigarettes. I'm like, you got to put that out because I smell it as if there's someone smoking in the room.
I don't like cigarette smoking either.
We need to pick a different smell.
I would prefer campfire or something like that if we're gonna do
Yeah.
a smoke smell.
We have multiple guides, but that's a whole other topic. You can work with them. I had one guide once. I was in meditation, laying on my bed. He came and sat cross-legged right next to me on the bed, at the bed depressed, and I just jumped. He appeared out of nowhere. Next time you need to make some kind of noise or something so I know when you're coming. The next time, it was so hilarious. It was like I heard, what it sounds like when you're walking through dead leaves in the autumn.
Yeah.
Crunch.
Hmm.
That's what I heard. Crunch, crunch, crunch. I just started laughing. I'm like, oh, thank you. Thank
That's so funny.
like, oh, you're here. And that's a clairaudient thing too, right? So
Hmm. Yeah, for
anyway,
sure.
we were just on claircentrance. That's the smell. So people can start working with that of just if they're smelling different flowers and knowing what that means to yourself, or you can look up online in general what it means and you can see what the message might be for you there, right?
Yeah.
And the last one is called clairsavourant, and that's with tasting. So you're tasting something even though that food or whatever is not in your mouth or not in your, we all know our mouth and our nose are connected. So these last two ones are actually connected as we develop them as well. But that can, and again, that's challenging for us here in the West to develop as well.
Yeah. I occasionally get like metal taste,
Mm.
that shows up every once in a while. I don't get that one very often.
That doesn't have to be a food taste. Lots of different tastes might be happening. And when there's nothing in your mouth or nothing smelling, that could be translated into taste, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
So it's just working with all of those, honing them.
So, what are some of the ways people can start to develop their intuitive abilities? Are
Yeah,
there any exercises that you recommend?
yeah, that's a great question. I just want to mention first, probably should have mentioned this in the beginning, right? A lot of people will say, well, I don't want to be a reader. I don't want to be a psychic reader or an intuitive. Why do I care what these are? Why do I want to learn them? It's to have that clear connection, receiving the communication from your higher self, from your inner guidance, when you want it versus when it just happens, right? I'm thinking of the loved one and the phone rings. This is like, hey, I got two job offers. What's the highest plan, right? I can see on paper what looks good, but your higher self soul is looking from way up here and knows the most joy-filled, love-filled, peace-filled path forward for you. Why wouldn't you want to receive that communication? So this is definitely
Absolutely.
for everybody.
Mm.
If you want to use it to be the dog whisperer or to be a reader or to be like John Edwards and communicating with people who have transitioned, the skills are the skills and you apply them everywhere, right? You can communicate with your bed, with your car, everything. And they have interesting things to say, especially when they're not working. It's like, what do you need? Right?
Hmm.
Or it's just some Reiki energy healing, right? Um, or it's some message you need to learn, slow down or whatnot. Circling back, starting out first is probably the easiest thing to start with is starting just with yes, no questions.
Okay.
So very simple, not an open-ended, because you are receiving the information. You have a lot of filters blocking us from receiving it. So you want to do a yes, no question. And if you're not sure what your one or two intuitive abilities are to start with, then you want to start. The yes, no question is like for me, it would be, is my name Kimberly?
Hmm.
Right? That answer should be yes. Whatever signal I'm getting is yes.
Hmm.
Giving me time, this could be a half an hour exercise of, is my name Kimberly? And I have my eyes closed and no one's bothering me. You could have soft music on if you want. And you're saying like, am I seeing, for clairvoyance, an easy thing is to see a traffic light. If green is lit, that means yes. If red is lit, that means no, right?
Hmm.
Something like that. It can be many different things, but you can ask, you can say to your soul, higher self soul, I want it to be a traffic light, right?
Sure.
You can also say like, am I feeling hot? And, I'm left-handed, so I usually have my left hand be yes. And I want to feel the tingles and you're just sitting there. I'm just like, okay, please turn up the knob to make it louder, make it bigger, whatever it is. If you're not feeling something, it could be, okay, well, I don't know. I'm saying, is my name Kimberly? I know the answer is yes. I kind of see that the traffic light, it looks like it might be a little green, but I could be making that up. Right?
Uh-huh.
And so it's nice to know to hone more than one to start with because you can self-validate yourself. So then you can
Yeah.
say, like, I want to feel the tingles in my hands, right? This hand means yes, this hand means no. And then, is my name Kimberly? I know the answer is yes. So what am I feeling? Am I feeling anything? Oh, I'm not
Mhm.
feeling tingles, but I'm actually feeling my yes hand is getting a little warmer.
Hmm.
Oh, maybe I'm making it up, but I can't be making up two things, right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So I saw something and I felt something, the clairvoyance and the kinesthetic to start with, right?
Yeah. Perfect.
So that's just how to figure out which ones you want to start with. I have a whole class. This is just a quick toe in the water, but
Hmm.
to, it's a lot more involved. That's why there's a class.
Yeah, of course. It
But
can be developed like anything
yeah,
else.
once you're kind of like, okay, I think staying with this example, okay, I think my strong suits are kind of clairvoyance and kinesthetic to start with. I'm feeling things physically, I'm seeing things. Now you want to practice with yes, no questions, but there's three things to do. One is you need it to be simple. So you give yourself two options, right? Is it
Hmm.
option this, yes or no? Is it option that, yes or no? So you keep a simple question. The second thing is you need to give yourself a lot of time. So you can't be like, I'm trying to do this as I'm running out the door for an appointment, right?
Wow,
You
that's
need to
true.
have time. I asked my soul what top to wear for our recording today. I can ask just open ended, but if it's like, okay, this top or a blue top, right? It's like yes or no, not one or the other. You're going
Mhm.
back and forth. Something we would answer in seconds could take you up to a half an hour, right? You're going back and forth. I think it's kind of like green light on this one. I think it's kind of the red light on this one. I think the yes hand is tingling, right? You're giving
Yeah.
yourself time to go back and forth and
Hmm.
validate yourself. One, simple question. Two, having enough time. And when no one else is around, because we feel weird. We don't want anyone else potentially barging in our room at home, or we're not going to do it out in public because anyone could see us. You have
Yeah.
that added thing. And this practice is helping to heal our blocks,
Hmm.
our fears, to any kind of negative feedback we got as children, any negative feedback we had from other lifetimes. And it's just stepping us through.
Hmm.
So, right, one example that's good for everyone in this scenarios is like I was saying about the top. We wake up in the morning and we put on clothes.
Well, most of us.
Well, so if you're not putting on clothes, then you'd have to pick another example, but you can relate to it at least, right? So
Yes.
we go back to, okay, is it the highest plan for me? And you want to say the highest plan, right? It's the highest plan for me to wear this maroon top today. And you're waiting for your signals. Eyes are closed, calm, right? Oh,
Hmm.
right. Is it the highest plan to wear the blue top? Yes or no? Right. And you see me moving my hands. I'm moving my hands because with clear kinesthetic, sometimes not only do you feel tingling, you can feel like magnets.
Hmm.
Something is sucking you down, or a repelling magnet, something's pushing you away. Right. And you
Hmm.
can choose what you want that to mean. For me, if something's pushing me away, that means no. Right? Something sucking me in, that means yes, for these yes, no questions. Right. But it's also you're focusing your mind on option two.
Yeah.
Starting with something simple. I had a client who liked to drink tea in the morning. I said, pick two of your teas, right? And for picking an easy question that there is no wrong answer. There might be
Mhm.
a better answer, but the world is not going to end if you pick the wrong tea. She was at the point of practicing with her tea in the morning. And then she left me a message saying, I can't do it. I don't have intuitive feelings. I'm like, oh, what happened? She said, well, I was driving home yesterday and I was at a stop sign in my neighborhood and there was two different ways I could turn to get to my house. So I tried to do the yes, no, and I couldn't get any answers. I said, well, how's it going with the tea in the morning? It's like, I can kind of get it, but it takes a long time and it's really hard. I'm like, you just jumped from an introductory skill up to an intermediate skill, right? You're out
Hmm.
in public, you're at a stop sign, so it's time constrained, there are other cars,
Right.
and you have to be fast.
Hmm.
I'm like, you're not there. You haven't done those skills yet, right? That's just like, I'm going to
Yeah.
learn baseball and tomorrow I'm going to be on the World Series team.
Hmm. Yeah.
So, so one, be gentle, kind, compassionate with yourself. And two, you get to, it's really easy picking out my tea every morning. That's just a piece of
Hmm.
cake. Okay, now you can ramp it up.
Exactly.
I wouldn't ramp it up to like we're at a stop sign.
Hmm.
I would ramp it up to another thing a lot of people do, unless someone's doing it for them, food shopping, right?
Hmm.
Well, I know I want to buy apples for the week. And I know this is my favorite apple, and I'm in front of that apple bin. Which apples should you pick from the bin? You just want to yes, no it, like feeling like this one to come home with me. Okay, ask the yes, no and get your signals. Now you're in a public space, right? People might think you're wandering off into la la land in front of the apple bin. They probably won't care if you're standing there for several minutes. But now we're practicing with that. There's
Hmm.
no one I know around me. There's strangers, but there are people milling about. And
Hmm.
there's no wrong answer. All the apples in the apple bin are great. Right?
Yeah.
But it's starting to like, okay, which one? You don't want to say which one to start with. You want to stick with those yes, no questions, right?
Yeah, make it easy. But yeah,
Yeah,
it's good to think about just like start doing it every day, start doing it a little more here, a little more there, just start to practice, So it's a discipline. It's something that you need to work at it. So, that's how I ended up moving to Sedona actually was I opened up a map of the United States and I literally moved my hand over the different states. And I'm like, which state do I belong in? And I felt Arizona. And suddenly there was a tremendous heat coming off of that state. And I'm like, ooh, this feels warm and different. And, it wasn't happening on any of the other states that were next to it. So, I mean, that's actually how I ended up in Sedona.
that's
That's how it started.
yeah. And that's how Cynthia is explaining a more advanced technique. If you're working with your yes, no signals on what tea to drink, putting your hand over a map and where should I move is you're probably not going to get a clear answer if you're still focusing on which tea to drink today, kind of thing. But that's where
Right.
it goes, right? Whether it's an Olympic athlete or someone learning a foreign language, if you're not practicing every day, you're not going to make much progress. And you also making me think of asking about these mundane things. This lifetime is about becoming conscious, aware beings for everything. What am I eating? How much am I eating? What am I wearing? What am I saying? You're being conscious and aware of the highest plan for all of that. People might think, what does it matter what I'm wearing? Honing
Yeah.
your intuitive abilities, you practicing every day on something you think is mundane, you never know whether it's helping you, right? You pick one tea versus the other, and your body needed that more that day, right? Or
Mhm.
what it might be. And sometimes you don't know, but
Mhm. Yeah.
it's super important. It's not practicing with these mundane day-to-day things. This is helping you now.
Yeah. Exactly.
And then you get to the point where Cynthia was at, where she could just take out a map and go, okay,
I guess
where
I'm
should I live?
moving.
Where
Yeah.
should I live? Right.
Yeah.
Uh, and you can get that clear answer eventually. Or should I quit my job and move across the globe or
Yeah.
whatever?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It was really interesting how I ended up here. So let's talk a little bit about your books. What books do you have coming up and what are they going to be about?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I was guided to write 4 books, which might be 5 at the moment. And it's all about becoming conscious, aware beings, evolving to enlightenment and beyond to oneness. Those are 2 different things and very different levels of consciousness. And that's accessible this lifetime. So that's what the books are about. Let's talk about some of those skills, just like we're teaching you the skills for what the intuitive abilities are and how you can start honing them. It's the same thing with your spiritual growth, your spiritual evolution. It can give you the skills, and now it's the practicing and the honing, right?
Yeah.
Clearing all the filters and blocks, preventing you from having that clarity and discernment of who you are. And I keep saying clarity and discernment because it is huge and very self-evident now with AI being so pervasive.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone could take our images and voices and make us say and do anything. It's having that clarity and discernment. Is that AI, or did Kimberly really say this or do this? Right?
Mm-hmm.
It's super important just from a practical, mainstream, everyday life kind of thing nowadays, let alone, right? When I watch the news or a spiritual teacher giving a presentation, everything they say, I can say like, true, not true. They misunderstand that.
Mm-hmm.
It's getting that clarity versus, oh, this person wrote a book, so they're so important. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
or this person is on a stage talking to thousands of people, so they must really know. Not necessarily.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good
So
point.
it's having that discernment. And so a lot of times it's just they don't know what they don't know. We're all at different levels, different grades of consciousness. So I'm just trying to think real quick in the books. The first one is, here's the skills. You can come for the full workshops if you'd like. You can come for private sessions to help with these filters so that it can accelerate. Here's the book. Then after the book on fundamentals, there's the book on more advanced spiritual teaching, energy healing teaching as well. A lot of Reiki masters don't even know these techniques. You don't know what you don't know, then how can you even think about practicing it? Right. And then another one is going to be more about my experience on my path, like the great days, the not so great days, the mediocre days, and the learnings. Years ago, my teacher transitioned, but I said to her, I don't feel like I'm making any progress. It's been months. And she's like, you need to do a journal, not on what you're doing every day, but a journal about every breakthrough you have, no matter how small. And I find a lot of times I'm writing in it every day. So when I get to that point, and I get to it a lot of like, I just feel like I haven't made headway. You can look back, whether it's looking back over months or years, and you're like, oh, wow.
Yeah. Then you see you really came a long ways.
Yeah. And you see everyone's growth and evolution process is individual, but you have similar experiences of, oh my God, I had this great experience. And then now, oh my God, I haven't been able to get back to that. It's been days, weeks, months, years. How was I able to reach that one time? Right? You start beating yourself up, being impatient. The truth for those scenarios is your inner guidance, your higher self is giving you that experience of something to shoot for. Okay, so keep up with your skills and practice so you can get back here, and that'll be your 24/7,
Yeah, for sure. That's
right?
great.
So,
So
yeah,
how do people work with you if they want to, where do they go?
there's a couple of places. You can go to my website, bethechangenow.com. And there you'll see a list of the classes that are upcoming that are open to the public for registration. Some have prerequisites. So you'd have to contact me about that. On the website, there's also some free videos teaching different topics on like manifestation and fun things like that. And the other place would be my Instagram
I'll put it in the show notes.
or my YouTube
So,
channel. Everyone's welcome to have a 20-minute discovery session to ask me questions, whether it's about spirituality or energy healing or stuff going on in your life or whatever. So definitely welcome.
okay. All
Yeah.
right. Well, thank you so much. This has been a lot of fun, and I hope everybody is inspired to tap into their own intuitive abilities. Until next time, I wish everyone infinite abundance, and let's ascend together. Have a great day, everyone. Thanks for joining us on Life Ascended, where you can discover your divine potential every day. Please show your support by tuning in, following, sharing your comments, and inviting others to listen. Take it further by visiting ascension17.com for deeper spiritual growth, guidance, programs, and products.